And then very quickly we changed that into, you know what, creating e-portfolios for students is really cool, but people, all kinds of people are struggling with this. And this idea could really be a lot bigger than that. So we're going to tell the story. So I want to introduce this graph. We're going to tell the story through the graph of our new signups per day. So what this means is you can see we're still working throughout the summer. For the next 6 months, we're working on it part-time. And you can see here in July, our biggest sign-up day in history was, I think, about 13 signups. So 13 people signed up for an account. And this summer, basically, Dan, Chris, and I were all working on Weebly. Dan had an internship at GE in Connecticut. I was working for Merrill Lynch in New York. And Chris was working for MTV in New York. So we're all pretty close. And just, I would get home from my internship, go to Burger King, get 2 Junior Whoppers, a fry, and a glass of water, and that was my dinner every night. And then just sit there pounding on the keyboard, just coding sort of all these features for Weebly. So now one thing that's interesting is, and maybe we don't get it quite as much out here, but in the Valley, a lot of times there's almost this ADD about startups, right? So people go through Y Combinator, they go through the 4-month program, and then they launch, and it feels like a fizzle, and then 2 months later they stop working on it, maybe due to co-founder issues or something like that. One thing I want to point out here is that at this point, we'd been working on the idea for 6 months, right? 6 months is not an insignificant amount of time, and you can see here that we hadn't even launched yet. So the next moment is in October 2006, 8 months in. We finally felt like, hey, let's get some alpha testers. Let's just get some people using it. So I remember Dan went to a couple forums and started posting, hey, check out our project. Tell us what you think. And we set a new world record here. I think 33 users signed up one day. And you can see there's sort of some continuing interest, but certainly nothing much. So this is 8 months in. In October, I think I was reading Slashdot at the time, and there was some post about the Y Combinator, the application deadline's coming up, and I'd heard about Y Combinator before, but like vaguely didn't really know what it was, and so read into it a little bit. I remember I was sitting in my bedroom at 116 Beaver Hill, where we had 3 of us crammed in that one bedroom, and just reading Slashdot, I read all about Y Combinator. It seemed really interesting, and so I decided, with less than an hour to go in the application deadline, that I was going to put together an application and apply for Y Combinator. I didn't actually have enough time to ask Dan and Chris whether they were on board. So they, part of the application is they said put a star next to the names of people who won't be coming to San Francisco, and I just took a wild guess. I said, Fanini's pretty wild, like he'll do it, and I just figured Dan wouldn't do it. So that was my guess. I called him up the next day. I'm like, hey Chris, how do you feel about dropping out of college and moving to San Francisco? And he answered me on the spot. He's like, definitely, I'm in. Count me in. And then I called up Dan, and Dan was like, yeah, I'm in. Like I need to think about it, but I'm in. So then the next piece of the story is 9 months in. We drive up to Boston to interview at Y Combinator. At the time, Y Combinator had interviews in Boston for the class that was out in San Francisco in January for the winter class. They had interviews in January for the Boston class. So we went and interviewed in Boston, and I remember we'd gotten a little bit of press, but we were trying to get on TechCrunch to say that we had launched, but it wasn't coming. And I remember waking up the morning of our interview and rolling over in bed and grabbing my phone and seeing an email that said congrats. And I was like, oh, well, why is someone congratulating me? So I clicked on the email, and it turns out we'd been featured on TechCrunch, which was obviously a great thing to happen the morning of your interview for Y Combinator. So this is what a TechCrunch does not normally look like. Normally it goes straight up and straight down. But I built in a system, we were really afraid about the site crashing, not having enough capacity to accommodate everyone's going to try it out. So I built a system where once it reached a certain number, you would sign up, and everything would look normal. You'd sign up, but once it reached a certain number, it would pop up a message saying hey, you've signed up, you just can't use it yet. There's too many users right now, and we'll email you when you can use it. So I think Chris was like putting out fires, desperately trying to get this thing to scale up in a very short amount of time. Remember, during the Y Combinator interview, played it off very nonchalantly. I made a local backup on my computer so I could run it off my laptop, and just in case. And we were demoing at the Polygram, and I typed in Weebly.com and it wasn't loading. And nonchalantly I said, "Oh well, we just got TechCrunch today. The site must be like slow. Here, let me just switch over to my local one." Just didn't address it other than that. I remember looking over at Trevor, who's one of the partners, and he had these big glasses on. You could see the green TechCrunch glow in his glasses, so you knew he was reading the story. But this is 9 months in. I think we got about 2,000 users from being featured on TechCrunch. But we've been working on the company for about 9 months now. It's a really long amount of time. So here is the night that we were out waiting to get our news back from Paul Graham. And he said that he was going to call us at 7 p.m. And then we were out to dinner at a bar in Boston. This is our friend Dana. And he didn't call. Like 7 p.m. came around and we didn't have a call. And then 8 p.m. came around and we didn't have a call. And then 9 p.m. came around and we didn't have a call. And so I thought, man, for sure he's calling everyone who's been accepted, and now he's rolling around and calling everyone who didn't make it. And I remember just like staring at my food, and I couldn't eat, and I felt like I was actively developing stomach ulcers. And I just couldn't think about anything else. And I was like, for sure we didn't get in. And then Paul Graham called, and then I answered the phone call, and I ran outside, and he said, I'm calling to end your college career, and to let you know you've gotten into Y Combinator. So we instantly, after I finished talking with him, we instantly went back to the bar. We lined up 3 shots each in quick succession to celebrate, and I think this photo was taken right after that. So here's January 2007. So the next piece of the story is I packed up like all of our servers except for a few of them in my car to drive cross country, and I asked Dan and Chris what they were going to do, and they were like, "We're flying over there. See ya. Have fun." So they flew to San Francisco, and I drove to San Francisco, and I got stuck in a blizzard in Wyoming for like 3 days. It was horrible, and so we get to San Francisco, and believe it or not, at the time, VentureBeat wrote this article about how we decided to move to San Francisco instead of like Silicon Valley, instead of Palo Alto. How it was like a new trend that startups were doing this. And I think due to some of those stories, you can now see some of the press that starts coming in. But you see how it goes up, and then it kind of settles lower. But it's not skyrocketing. It's not just taking off. This is 11 months in. Here's what our apartment looked like out in San Francisco. It seems to be this common trend of just pushing a few desks together and just spending all your waking hours. You could really tell like how long ago this was now, because like look at that TV. Man, that looks old. And we just sat on these wicker chairs, these like tiny 15-inch like LCD monitors, and just spent all day coding. But at least we had a great view, right? This is our view out the window. We literally spent 24 hours a day. We would work usually until about 5 or 6 a.m. Usually until the light came up. We'd crash as much sleep as we needed, until we woke up without alarms. Usually about 8 hours, and then just wake up and just start working again, right? So just nonstop. Our only rule was, I do think, like Steve just said, monitoring burnout's really important. Our only rule was you were not allowed to work on Saturday. So from Friday at like 10 p.m., we'd stop work, go out to the bar, wake up Saturday. The rule is no work allowed. So like watch some trashy TV show, just like bask in the glory of wasting your time. That was sort of the rule on Saturdays. And then we'd go out Saturday, wake up, and start working like noon on Sunday. So that was probably for about 2 years, that was our regular work schedule. Just literally every waking hour but Saturday. This is interesting. This is a little hardware device that Chris hacked together. We sat in the middle of the table. It showed the total number of users and the users who were logged in. This is what it looked like for a while. There's 3 users logged in. That was the 3 of us sitting around the table. And I remember like the first day that number went to 4. Like we were really excited. That was a really big moment. And then here we go. We got another tech crunching in January. This is much more normal. It goes straight up as you get a spike of interest and then straight back down. But the thing to note here is, this is a very interesting graph. This is not like how successful startup graphs normally look, right? It goes up, it goes down, and then it sort of rests at a new level. but it's kind of declining, right? And I think at the time, like, we were just so excited to be getting like 50 new users a day, 100 new users a day, that I just don't think we like realized that this is not like a good looking graph. This is a pretty bad looking graph. You're not like, it's not like you have this slight trend upwards. You actually have this slight trend downwards that doesn't look too good. So then in April 2007 was sort of this new moment. It's when we were like graduating Y Combinator. And I remember there's a moment in time where we had like less than $100 in our bank account. And pretty much all we spent money on for like the first 4 months was like rent and bars. Those were pretty much our two major expenses. And this was an interesting moment because, like in retrospect, like we weren't really that worried about it. We kind of knew we were going to make it work. But it's a pretty scary moment if you like kind of step back and think about it. This is 14 months, so over a year after we first started working on Weebly. And like rent was coming up in 2 weeks, and like we didn't have enough money to buy food for 2 weeks, like let alone pay rent. So I remember having these discussions. Dan said, "Hey, maybe my dad could loan us some money, but we really got to cut down our burn if we're going to do that. So we got to move to San Jose." I said, "I don't want to move to San Jose. Like we're going to make this happen. We're going to make it work." And then shortly thereafter, we closed a $650K angel round. So we raised money from Steve Anderson, Mike Maples, Ron Conway, Iden, a bunch of sort of usual suspects as far as angels go. Incidentally, this is also what a round of financing looks like paper-wise. It's a huge amount of paper to be signed. And also kind of dates us because people don't really do these price rounds anymore. They do convertible notes, which are like 3 or 4 pages now. So now we had some money to survive and some money to eat and pay rent. Probably next major milestone was in May. As part of the Y Combinator class, Stephen Levy was sort of shadowing that Y Combinator class, wrote a big Newsweek story. Again, also dates us because Newsweek doesn't exist anymore. But at the time, having your photo in Newsweek and like sending that to your parents was a pretty big deal. That was kind of like, your parents like at least knew something good was happening when your photo was in Newsweek. Also kind of funny aside story, but they told us that Stephen Levy was coming to one of the Y Combinator dinners and that there was 12 startups at the time. So it was kind of just, you want to impress him, right? Because then you'd be featured in the story. Not everyone was featured in the story. And so we're starting to do some research just like on his background, where he went to school. It turns out he went to grad school at Penn State. So when I read that, I knew we'd definitely have an in. And it turns out that was sort of, the beginning of the story was just talking about 3 Penn State kids. So here's what that Newsweek looks like. Interestingly, you can see when it comes out online and in print with those kind of 2 spikes. And, so we're getting some more attention here, right? Like we're getting some more users, but 15 months in, we still have this little declining graph here. At the time we were just really excited, but looking back on this, I mean, this was clearly, we hadn't gotten product market fit. The graph goes up and it settles at a new level, which is great, but it's declining from that point, and that's really not so good. Here's what Weebly International HQ looked like at that point in time. Still the 3 desks together. We'd actually moved one apartment over to a slightly larger apartment. You can see here on our monitor dashboard here, 31,000 users, and you can see basically our to-do list on the whiteboard. So we all had a column, and each of the things we wanted to get done that week, we'd write on the column, and then every week we'd just go through like what we got done. So there's Dan with a couple more monitors now. And then here's August 2007. So we got featured in one of the best websites of 2007 by Time. And you can see here there's another big spike. This is 18 months in. But again, it's declining. It's not going up. So 18 months in, we didn't have any real traction. There wasn't. It wasn't just. We weren't just crushing it. It wasn't just like traffic was exploding. Like 18 months in, that's a year and a half. That's a really long time, right? We've been working on this for a year and a half, and we're still not getting any real traction, right? So I mean, if you're working on a project, just think about how long you've been working on it, and what are your expectations. And then realize that we'd been working on this for a year and a half and hadn't gotten any real traction. So The next moment here is October 2007. This is exciting now. This is one of the big moments, in retrospect, 20 months in and things start taking off, right? It's kind of on its own without getting any new press. Now this word of mouth factor is starting to build up and it's starting to go up. So 20 months after we started working on Weebly, finally we're seeing some real traction. In July 2008, we moved into this office. I was just talking with our real estate broker, John, that helped us with this, and he said for historical reference, we moved in July 2008 and Lehman went bankrupt in September 2008. So a couple months after we moved in the office, major financial crisis. But this is what our office looked like. You can see here, again, this kind of concept of just pushing some desks together. It was a pretty small space, had a kitchen, and then another office, but really enough room for about 12 people. This is July 2008, 29 months after we started working on Weebly. And I think the next interesting moment happens around December 2008. So we were sort of looking at like how much runway we had. Runway is how many months you have left till you run out of money. And around, probably around February, March, April of 2008, we're like, okay, we're probably going to run out of money in about September of 2008. So we probably should just go out there and raise another round of financing, but let's give it a shot, maybe at getting profitable, right? Like, let's just see if this happens. I don't think we really expected to be able to do it. And so in June of 2008, we launched Weebly Pro, which was our first premium option. Up until that point, it was completely free. Actually, it was doing pretty well. But then it was like September, October, and we're like, we're not really going to be able to squeeze through. We're definitely going to run out of money. So let's go raise another round. Lehman went bankrupt in September, so it wasn't a great time to be raising money. We got a term sheet, like we got an offer to raise money, but we didn't really like the terms. So we said, all right, we're just gonna kind of tough through it, just make it happen. This is a graph of our bank account balance from that point in time. So we basically get to this point in December 2008, where that blue dot is, where we're kind of like, well, I don't think we're gonna be able to make payroll for January. But we're not that far off, right? We're like barely far off from being profitable, but like kind of like a little bit short. So like Dan, Chris, and I got together, and we just like took out a calendar and we laid out all the bills and when they were due, and then we split bills into two camps. Like the first set of bills, like if you didn't pay those bills and your servers got shut off, so you definitely have to pay those bills. And then like the second set of bills, if you didn't pay those bills, like nothing that bad happened, So we're like, okay, we're not going to pay those bills for now. We're just going to just see what happens with those. And like we barely squeezed through. And it turns out that like January is a great month for our business, right? So in January, this happened, right? So basically in January, we barely squeezed through. We start paying our bills again, and you see how we just sort of squeezed by, and all of a sudden we made the cash flow positive and we're profitable. So 35 months in, I think that's the next major milestone. February 2010, I think really is a good snapshot of a moment where it's off to the races. 48 months after we started working on Weebly. That's 4 years, right? After we first started working on Weebly, now finally things are looking really positive. You can see, if you go all the way back, you can see those little blips all the way in the beginning. That was the major press coverage, and you can see now how every day we're getting many, many times more users than was brought just through word of mouth. In March 2011, we partnered with Sequoia, 61 months in. And so where are we now? So today there are 175 million people every single month that visit a site made on Weebly. To put that in perspective, it's about 33% of the United States visits a Weebly site every single month, whether they know it or not. 120 people currently work at Weebly. We're probably going to grow that number to about 200, 250 by the end of the year. And probably my favorite stat is our Net Promoter Score. It's a measure basically of how much people talk about your product, how much they like the product, and just how good you're doing at creating just this intuitive, amazing product for your users. 80% is very, very high. Put in comparison, Apple's Net Promoter Score is 63%, and that's considered incredible, right? So this, I think, really explains everything about the business, that we really just focus on creating this amazing experience for our users and treating, being partners for them, being a trusted partner, not trying to rip them off, but really sort of being in it with them and helping them grow their business. This is what our office looks now, kind of as you walk into the reception. You can see here the reception and the conference room in front. You can see here this view down into this, so upstairs is work, downstairs is play. Here's someone's, sort of from someone's desk working. You can see this big open office work area. My desk is right in one of those middle rows, right in the middle. There's no private offices, no one's walling themselves away from the rest of the company. A little, break room, TV room. We built it thinking, like, are people really going to go watch movies? But actually, it turns out that there's a big game on, like a lot. And the people, instead of going to the bar, people just bring their laptops down, grab a beer, and watch the game. Here's what the downstairs looks like. We have these large picnic tables where everyone comes and eats lunch together every day. We have free catered lunch. Down here we do yoga once a week, massages every other week, and actually all the way in the back you can actually see this DJ gear. That's actually sort of what that's how I paid my way through college. That's how I put myself through Penn State, and all that old gear is still back there. The last thing is look at the bookshelf. If you know the right book, we don't normally show this to people who don't come in the office, but if you know the right book, it's Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. That was the team's choice. If you pull that book, the bookshelf slides open and reveals this pretty cool speakeasy back there, kind of an ode to the history of the building. And very soon we're actually going to be moving into a new office, hopefully in July of this year. We're going to be moving into a new 60,000 square foot space. Here's what the building will look like. It'll accommodate about 425 people, and that should last us hopefully for a few years. And yeah, it's April 2014. It's been almost 100 months since we started working on Weebly, 98 months. And the story's still unfinished. We're still growing. I'm incredibly proud of how we're able to help people, take their dreams, take their vision, and bring it to reality. But still a lot of work left to do. There's a lot more in that vision that we haven't delivered yet. And it's still an unfinished story. The story, the ending hasn't been written. So a couple lessons learned. Things I think that we've learned along the way that we could have done differently. I think the number one lesson that hopefully you're getting here is that you can't succeed if you quit. It sounds stupid, right? It sounds dumb, but Y Combinator's recently started talking about. They originally thought that the number one predictor of a good founder would be just raw intelligence, and they actually now know that to be false. The number one predictor of a good founder is sheer determination, right? And a lot of times. People working on a startup, it's just not working out. I don't know. It's there's always obstacles, right? There's always something in your way, if you do that, then you're not going to succeed, right? The only way to be successful is if you just, out of sheer determination, you just keep going and don't quit. I think a lot of startups have near-death stories, things that were going wrong, really the number one lesson I think is that we were young and dumb. And just kept going, right? Like we didn't know even what success could look like or what it was supposed to look like, and just through sheer determination made this happen. I think number two, for us specifically, I think there's a very fine balance on growing the team. I think a mistake we made was early on we were a little too afraid to grow the team, right? We were really proud of being small, profitable, and very effective as a small team, but ultimately that's not how you're going to grow a large business, right? It's just with a few people. So, I think some people, it really depends. Some people are biased towards hiring, right? Some people are empire builders and they just want to hire a lot of people. I think that's very bad too. You want to basically, the way we think about it is you have your business and you have your company, right? And the business is this like invisible thing where money just kind of flows in from your customers, like across like the internet, and it just kind of arrives. And you don't really get to see it. It's kind of this digital thing. And the company is like your office, your people, what the culture's like. And I think it's very important. You don't want to let one get too out of whack from the other. So if your business is growing, you want to scale up the company to match. But it's also pretty bad if you scale up the company, but the business isn't growing, right? So you want to make sure that those are, matching pretty closely. And then the last thing I think that's a great piece of advice that we still struggle to do every day is just try to focus on that one thing. Like, when you're starting a company, there'll be a million different things you can focus on, right? Maybe you think you should incorporate and talk to some lawyers. Maybe you think you should get some patents. Maybe you think, there's all these things always that you can focus on. And I think this really applies to everyone, not just startups. But keeping in mind, what's that one thing that would get me to the next level, right? What's that one thing? And just focus on that one thing. Focus all of your energy on that one thing that gets you to your next step, right? That gets you up a level. And then just try to focus all your energy on that and don't focus on distractions. So the last thing I want to show you is a short video that kind of highlights kind of how we see Weebly, the vision for the company, a little bit about our customers. So hopefully you enjoy it.
Just because I have a full-time job doesn't mean I can't have a side business.
Being a mom and having my own business is the best thing that's happened to me. Every great idea needs a great website. Over 20 million people around the world have created their website with Weebly. Weebly is with you every step of the way to help inspire, create, and grow your unique idea and bring it to life.
I really love working for myself because I have so much freedom.
Getting started is a breeze. We hope you set goals, get organized, and find your inspiration. With hundreds of themes, fonts, and styles to choose from, Weebly gives you the freedom to create a site that reflects your personality. Our powerful drag and drop builder lets you quickly design your site for web and mobile. Include high-quality images, fonts, and video. With Weebly, creating your own online store has never been easier. Accept payments, add a shopping cart, and handle shipping all from one place. We make it simple to help your community grow and share your site with the world. Plus, we make it easy for search engines to find your site. The best part is you can update your site in real time from anywhere. So with Weebly in your corner, it's never been easier to start your something. What will you start with Weebly?
All right, well, thank you very much, and I'd love to take any questions. Yeah.
That was a great presentation.
Thank you.
My question for you is, what do you think was the main differentiator between your founding team, which had great success, and another founding team, which had success but on a lower level?
Yeah, so the question is, what was the main differentiator between our founding team, which has had some success to date, and maybe another founding team that didn't? I think probably the biggest thing is just we were all friends, right? We all we met in the dorms, we sort of grew up together, and we had this really close friendship, and that still continues to this day. And I think when times got tough, we trusted each other. And when one of us was down, because the thing about the entrepreneurial journey is that it's a roller coaster ride, right? You're constantly, something happens, you're extrapolating the future from that one event, and it always looks like your company either is blowing up and it's in a good way, right? Like it's going to be super successful, or you're dead, right? Like you're definitely not going to be going any longer. So I think through all those times, it was just helpful to have this like very close friendship. That could kind of carry us through, and when one person was feeling down, the other could cheer them up, and when one person is feeling great, could bring up the whole team. So I think it's having a really, I think it's really important to have a really trusting relationship, and for us having a strong friendship brought that.
Your money-making model.
Sorry?
Your money-making model. How do you
Yeah, business model. So the question is our business model. It's really simple and honest. Basically, you try Weebly for free. You get a lot for free. We give you a lot of value for free, and if you like it, you pay us a little bit of money. So it's anywhere from our packages range starter, pro, and business. They range from $4 a month, $8 a month, $25 a month. A lot of people are able to get a lot of value, and $25 a month for an e-commerce site is actually a great value. Yeah.
How did you arrive at that?
How did we arrive at that? Well, we wanted to not go out of business, so we decided we were going to charge people money for something, and I don't know. We didn't really to kind of Steve's point, like he mentioned earlier. I think when you're starting, you're just kind of shooting from the hip, and you just have this gut intuition, and hopefully you're more right than wrong. And so we just kind of figured that charging people money was like a pretty honest way to go about it. Yeah, and we've grown from there. I mean, now we're at the point where we make decisions. We test them, and we have these models and business cases and all that kind of stuff. But early on, it was just it just was kind of intuition. We said, yeah, just charging people just a low monthly fee just seemed like the right way to do it.
Tell the Snap Ad story.
Sure. So in the middle of some of those graphs, like it was kind of going like this. It wasn't really wasn't really shooting up and to the right. And so we dabbled in a couple other products, because actually for a while there we kind of figured like Weebly wasn't a great business. Like it seemed cool, but again it wasn't like taking off. So we met MC Hammer, and he really wanted. I had this great story where I was laying in bed with my girlfriend at the time, who was now my wife, and we're kind of falling asleep, and then my phone rings, and I was on her side of the bed, and she takes my phone and goes, "Oh, MC Hammer is calling." You should probably answer that. So first we tried this concept of like, hey, we have this whole customization ability, sort of drag and drop. Let's bring this to MySpace profiles, because MySpace at the time was really hot. We called that Snap Layout. And when it became very obvious that MySpace was a sinking ship, we bailed pretty quickly on that one. And then the next. Another thing, though, is we tried this concept of Snap Ad. So it was basically using a genetic algorithm to try to optimize display ads, right? So display ads, like you have a green button, a red button, it can say click here, try now, buy now, whatever. And we built this super cool technical backend to use a genetic algorithm to optimize it. It turns out the ad business is a shitty business to be in, so we bailed on that one pretty quickly and just like doubled down on Weebly. So the question is, do I ever regret dropping out of college, and how did my parents react? This is actually an interesting story. So I was doing, so I had both an IST major and an MIS major in SMEAL, and I was going to finish them both on time. I moved out to San Francisco, and I knew I just wasn't going to be able to do that anymore. It just wasn't as important. And besides the piece of paper, I kind of learned most things I wanted to learn out of the MIS degree. So I actually ended up dropping the MIS degree, just had 2 IST classes left, was able to take those sort of out there for that semester. Both those professors were very accommodating, which was amazing. And I was able to graduate on time. Dan graduated that summer, so he kind of did a similar thing, and he graduated a semester late. And then Chris, for the longest time, I could say Chris was way cooler than us because he was an actual college dropout. But about 5 years later, he also finished his degree and graduated. So I know the pressure from his mom was getting to him, and so he finally got his degree. So the question is, when we first started, how did we stay focused on that one thing, right, versus getting distracted and building all these cool features? I mean, the honest answer is we didn't. You always try to, but there's always so many things you get distracted. But I think to the extent that we just had a pretty strong focus just on Weebly, continuing to improve the product, continuing to build it out, make this just incredibly intuitive, easy, amazing experience for our users. That was always our obsession, and that's what we focused on. And the truth is, we got distracted with little things along the way. I mean, it's always a struggle to remember to try to focus on the thing that one thing that brings you to the next level. And I think as much as you try to focus on it, that helps. But it's always so easy to get distracted.
I wonder what you guys specifically worked on in your team.
Yeah, that's a great question. So early on, what did we work on, right? Like, how did we divide our responsibilities? Early on, Chris and I were just like banging on our keyboards, coding nonstop, and then Dan did everything else. And everything else was like a lot of other things. He had a lot of really great input into the product side of things, which is actually now his core focus. Just the vision of how things should work, how everything should be laid out, what it should do. I remember early on, and this is one of our key innovations. Early on, I was talking with Dan on the phone, and I thought the hosting business was like a commoditized, low margin, like shitty business to be in. Like just don't want to be in the hosting business. So I figured we were going to stay nice and clean and like rise above the fray, and we're going to provide this tool where you could use with any hosting account, and you'd put in your FTP credentials, and it would FTP the site over. And Dan kind of called me. He's like, yeah, but like my mom wouldn't really know about FTP accounts and how to do that. So like I think we should just host the sites ourselves. And I'm like, Dan, you're wrong. Like I'm positive I'm right. Like this is how we're doing it. And he's like, okay. And then like 2 weeks later, he tried me again. Like I really think we should like host the sites. And I was like super stubborn and I said no. And then finally, I realized like I was just an idiot, and he was right all along. And there's no way that anyone wants to like go through this horrible process setting up a hosting account. So I think that's one story for Dan. On Chris's end, Chris did a lot of the early programming with me. Whenever we hire an engineer, I start by apologizing because a lot of the code was written, in like sprint marathon sessions. Like I wrote our entire blogging engine in 1 week because for whatever reason, like we had this press deadline for when we were going to announce it. And then like a week before, I was like, oh shit, we don't have blogs. So I was like, well, better get working. So basically, Chris and I were coding. Chris has now moved on to handling the entire ops side of things. So servers scaling up, making sure that we're, information security, making sure that everything is just, that is a core competitive advantage for us now as our data centers and running that.
So you guys power about 2% of all the sites in there. And you have this huge network. Have you ever considered allowing users to opt into an ad network and then splitting that revenue with them?
Yeah, the question is, so since we have such a large network, have we ever considered allowing our users to opt into an ad network and then like splitting the revenue with them? I mean, obviously we've thought about it. Like I'm not a big fan of advertising in general. I just think it's kind of a shitty business to be in. We allow users to drag Google AdSense on. We have this really cool AdSense integration where users can drag ads onto their site and like customize them and like make some revenue from their site. We used to split half of the revenue with them, which until last year brought us about probably $150,000, $200,000 a year. That wasn't a lot of money, so we actually just decided to switch it and just give 100% of the revenue back to our users. And like when we told Google to do that, Google was like, "Are you crazy? Like, what are you guys doing?" But I think ultimately, like it just wasn't worth it for us. And so, I mean, to answer your question, I'm not a huge fan of advertising, but we'll see.
Are you monetizing the free?
So the question is, are we monetizing the free accounts? No. So the free accounts are free. There's no ads on your site. You get free hosting. There's no, we've had free sites be featured on the homepage of CNN. We've had 4 or 5 users now be featured on Shark Tank. That drives an incredible amount of traffic, but since we power such a large network, it's not even a blip in the radar. So the answer is no, and I think that's a pretty compelling value, right? Where people recognize that. That's probably one of the things that helps with word of mouth, is that we do give a lot away for free, and we're not trying to steal every dollar out of your pocket. Like we believe in a fair and honest relationship with our users, with our customers, and a lot of people use it for 3 years for free, then decided that they feel like they got value and they can now afford it and upgrade. So to answer your question, no, and I think we're always going to keep that free component.
What's your competition doing? I realize people that start with Weebly tend to stay, but if somebody else is growing faster, how are you kind of combat that?
Yeah, so the answer is like, what's our competition doing? I think, the way we think about it is we don't necessarily think a lot about our competition. It's not a mature market, right? So we see basically this major macroeconomic trend happening, right? Which is, there's a lot been discussed about sort of software eating the world, jobs are being automated. Like software is more and more sort of automating more and more jobs, right? And so then there's this big question of, what are people going to do about that, right? Like that's, that, you know, there's so much positive impact, but also for some people it's negatively affecting them. And we really believe that the answer to that is creating sort of empowering technology platforms that can help people just make it for themselves, right? So people have this idea, they have this, you know, some vision that they want to bring to the world, and you know, we want to be that entrepreneurial springboard that helps people, you know, jump off the springboard and take a leap, and you know, start that thing, whatever their thing is. And so ultimately, we think it's a very large market that's still in very early stages. And it's not, you know, more mature market might have, might be more of a zero-sum game where you steal market share from one person and get to the other, but ultimately, you know, we think this is a very, very large opportunity. This is going to be something that, a lot of people are going to be doing going forward. And we're just really excited about helping people, you know, sort of bring their vision to reality.
David, one of the challenges people talk about in small companies when they transition and get larger is there are startup people and then there are managers and that sort of thing. Talk a little bit about your transition and your thoughts about how you still are able to stay fresh and so on and still have 120 people working for you.
Yeah, so the question is, sort of as companies grow from the very early, from the 3-person stage up until the, you know, let's say multiple thousands or tens of thousands stage, you know, it's a very different job, right? And so how do you adapt and what's that like? I mean, I think, you know, right now we have 120 people. You know, we're expecting that to be over 200 by the end of the year. So we're growing very quickly. You know, there's just different challenges at different points in time. You know, I think there's been all kinds of phases we've already gone through. And sometimes that gives people a little bit of anxiety. Who work at Weebly, oh, well, what if things change? What if it stops being so awesome around here? But I always thought when the good news is, like, you know, there will be things that break, but the good news is we can fix them, right? It's not like some system that like we can't like shape. So there have been, you know, many different sort of, you know, distinct phases, if you will, so far. And you know, we're sort of always evolving, always learning. You know, as the team scales up, sometimes you have unanticipated, you know, points where things break down and you just have to, you know, change it up. And I think SoftBank's CEO said that, Masa said that basically everything changes in 1s and 3s. So 10, 30, 100, 300, 1,000, 3,000, right? And that's definitely felt very true so far. And so I think, you know, whenever you hit one of those inflection points, then you just have to kind of look at what's broken and go about fixing it and just, you know, changing things up a bit.
So you said you focus on entrepreneurs. Did you always have that focus, and how did you decide?
Yeah, so no, we didn't always have that focus. I mean, so the question is, you know, we say we're focused on entrepreneurs. Did we always have that focus? And so the answer is no. We started off basically saying, here's this thing that we know is really hard, and we want to make it easier, right? And the reality is, creating a website was just totally out of reach for most people, right? And what we've done is we've just boiled it down, made it easy enough that now it's actually easy enough for anyone to do. So we've had people as young as 5, as old as 95 create a site, and then we sort of looked at, you know, what people were doing with it, right? And a couple years ago we went through this intensive customer development cycle, and saying, you know, what are people? You know, we knew all these things that people were doing with their sites, right? But like, what's like the common thread? And as part of that, we discovered that 60% of people that are creating a site on Weebly consider themselves entrepreneurs. And then we thought, well, maybe just the whole U.S., just like maybe it's 60% of people in the U.S. that consider themselves an entrepreneur. So just for shits and giggles, we did a consumer survey. And it turns out a little under 10% of people in the U.S. like would consider themselves an entrepreneur. So we found we had this really vibrant group of doers, of makers. These weren't people who were just sitting around like on their hands. These were people who were out there making it happen, right? And that was really exciting for us. A couple years ago, we sort of, you know, it was always there, but a couple years ago, we just refocused around entrepreneurs, around people who have this idea and want to, you know, bring it to the world. And it's been really exciting.
Security, you briefly mentioned it, but how do you make sure that on
Yeah. So that's a great question. Security. How do we make sure we maintain, great security? What do we do about the Heartbleed stuff? With Heartbleed specifically, like we weren't affected by that just because of the way our network's configured and the SSL load balancer we're using. Chris spoke a good bit in his talk about security. It's something we take very, very seriously. We work very hard to maintain very high security, things like whole disk encryption on all of our laptops, two-factor authentication. That's just the tip of the iceberg. There's a whole bunch of things. But, long story short, it's something we take really seriously, pay a lot of attention to it. And, I think for us, it's very important.
Have you ever had any goofs or outages that affected people's websites?
Have we ever had a goof or an outage that affected people's websites? You want me to tell that story? Yeah. Well, there's one that Steve's referring to. As you're scaling up, obviously at times, you have less reliability than you would have liked as things are growing very quickly. We've maintained great reliability over the service, especially in the last few years, as we were able to just get a little bit ahead of the curve. Probably the last 4 or 5 years, we've just had amazing uptime. But the story I'm going to tell affected Steve specifically, where Steve set up a site for his wedding when he was getting married. And then it was like a generic template, and there was an image in the template with a dude on it. And he just typed in the title with an arrow to the dude, "Who the fuck's this guy?" And that was while he was just testing it out. And then he actually set up the website, and he sent out all the invitations, and then I'm sure you guess where the story is going. And then we had a really bad outage, and we had to temporarily roll back to a backup from a few days ago. And Steve called me, was like, "Dude, my website's been hacked." Or no, so someone called him up, was like, "I think your wedding website's been hacked." And it turns out that everyone was going to his wedding website, showed up to the site with a photo of a random dude and an arrow saying, "Who the fuck's this guy?" Yeah, we felt pretty bad about it. But I think that's the story you're talking about. Any other questions?
I'd just like to take the opportunity to make just a couple remarks. So, as the dean of this college, all of the people who have come in this week are just fantastic. They're all sort of poster children about what IST is about, and the enthusiasm and all of that is just tremendous. And I've told people that our students that in effect they're getting an MBA in entrepreneurship in 1 week if they just simply listen to what's going on here. But I think the thing that is most astounding to me about David, in addition to, clear brilliance and incredible hard work and so on, is his generosity. His generosity in his time, his generosity in coming back and providing scholarships for other young entrepreneurs, and his generosity in linking up with his friends and associates and so on from a warm place and having them come back to Happy Valley for a few days and so on. So I think that's just an incredible story, and all of the people that have given presentations and talked and so on, your generosity in terms of your generosity with giving advice and so on, and just providing just really clear, no BS answers to hard questions and so on, I think is fantastic. So I really want to thank you, David, and you've made a tremendous difference in this school, and we really appreciate all your efforts.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much.